Hey everyone. Thank you to Patrick for letting me know that I have been muted this whole time. Um, we'll edit this recording. Welcome everyone to this workshop on using OpenRefine for complex data cleanup. There are a lot of people in the room today that were in the room yesterday, so that's great. Good to see you all again. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Lead for ArchivesSpace, and we're led today by Megan Brett of the Jefferson Foundation and Courtney Ruckert of Xavier University of Louisiana. Also with me today are ArchivesSpace Lead Program Manager Christine DeBella and ArchivesSpace Program Assistant Bailey Grace Harrell. I'm going to drop a Google Drive link into the chat in just a second. If you were here yesterday, you remember I'm going to drop a lot of links into the chat. The Google Drive link will contain today's agenda. In addition to the schedule, this document contains a lot of links, so valuable post-workshop resources. Also within that Google Drive, there's already some resources for today's session, the slides for today and things like that. You do not need to have those pulled up. There's no expectation that you be following along in OpenRefine for any of this. There's no exercises. We just encourage you to follow along with what you're seeing on the screen with the instructors. And if there's any additional follow-up information that needs to be shared, we'll drop that into the Google Drive too. Additionally, this workshop is the last virtual component of our 2025 annual member forum. So we had a workshop yesterday and a workshop today, and then we will have our annual in-person meeting in Anaheim, California on August 24th. There's still time to register for that. So if you do plan to be in Anaheim for SAA, we hope to see you at our meeting on the 24th. I'll drop a link to the program wiki in the chat as well. In your agenda, as well as the program wiki, there is a post-forum survey. That survey is for both the workshop yesterday, the workshop today, and the in-person meeting. So if you're not able to make it to the in-person meeting, if you want to go ahead and fill out that survey for this workshop or both workshops if you attended, that would be great. This session is being recorded and will be made available in the Help Center as soon as it is available. You'll notice that your microphone and camera are both muted. Please feel free to talk with fellow attendees via the chat. But if you have a question about the content of the session that you want answered during the Q&A or you want answered by Megan or Courtney, please post those questions into the Q&A option. And we'll answer those in the order they're received, but we'll be holding them until allocated time for Q&A. We do have a fairly large number of people today. So just keep in mind, we all are from a variety of institutions and have a variety of skill sets. All attendees and participants in this webinar are expected to adhere to the ArchivesSpace Code of Conduct, and all attendees should be considerate and respectful in their interactions in the Q&A and the chat. I'll drop another link at the end where you can find our Code of Conduct as well as our community core values. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Megan.
All right, hello there, everyone. I'm Megan Brett. I'm just starting with a couple of slides, and then we will get into the meat of things. Just to reiterate what Jessica said, this is being recorded. There are resources in the agenda and in the Google Drive, so don't worry if you don't catch something the first time. There are lots of resources for learning this. So today we're going to go over the basics of transformations in OpenRefine, talk a little bit about dates, have a break, get into regular expressions, talk about regular expressions and data information, and then there will be time for question and answers. I just wanted to start off. Yesterday, you heard from Courtney. Hopefully, some of y'all were here yesterday with us. She talked about working with OpenRefine to get data ready to go into ArchivesSpace. My situation is a little different. My institution was already using ArchivesSpace when I started, almost exactly 2.5 years ago. And but our information in our space came from a lot of different other formats like Word documents, PDFs that had been OCR'd, and other systems. So the mapping didn't always work, and we had some data that wasn't necessarily consistent in formatting or using ArchivesSpace in the best way. So for me, my takeaway for today is that OpenRefine and the bulk update spreadsheets is happiness. I have been primarily using OpenRefine with the bulk update spreadsheets. It has made my life really good, both the plugin or function, depending on your version of ASpace, with OpenRefine has just allowed me to do work much more fastly and much more quickly and efficiently than it would have otherwise. So we're going to get started talking about OpenRefine. And I want to talk to you about transformations. Courtney showed you some yesterday of the transformations you can use. OpenRefine has an entire language of functions in addition to some basic transformations that you can take on columns, either the entire column or just the column results when you faceted and filtered. And these functions have a basic syntax. They use a programming language called GREL, which is the General Refine Expression Language, I think. And they all look basically like this. So value, which is the contents of your column, each cell individually, dot function, whatever the thing is doing, parentheses, modifiers, operators, instructions to that function, close parentheses. What that looks like in practice is if we had a title column and it had a bunch of instances of ArchivesSpace, but with a space between the S's, and we wanted to fix it to be properly formatted, we would use the function replace. So that would be value, because we're doing it on the column title, every title cell, replace, parentheses, in quotation marks, ArchivesSpace with the space, what we want to replace, comma, in quotation marks, ArchivesSpace, no space, parentheses. And if we ran that transformation, it would automatically do that. This is obviously something you could also do in Excel. This is a very basic example. There are ways to make this much more complicated in OpenRefine, and that's where the power really comes out. But I wanted to give you a really basic example to sort of give you a sense of the syntax before we get into the messiness. So switching over to an OpenRefine project, yesterday, Courtney did show you how to go through importing a project. I wanted to show you just this step of importing a project because if you're working with a bulk update spreadsheet like this one, the important thing is not to import your enums sheet because otherwise you just have all of this extra stuff around. So when you're importing, it's just easier to remember, only click one sheet, not both sheets. Otherwise you end up with strange things. And here we go. So if you've worked with the bulk update spreadsheet, these should look pretty familiar. The first step I always take when I'm doing this is to prevent myself from messing up that very first row. That very first row is really important for the spreadsheet update job to run when we go back to ASpace, but I don't want to touch it while we're here. So I always star it and then facet by star and choose false. And what that does is it just puts it away, and any transformation I run now is only run on the matching rows, our 29 matching rows, rather than our 30 total. So I don't mess up that row. Very, very important to leave that one nice and untouched. So this data is pretty typical of a lot of the resources that we had in ASpace, where there's something in date expression, but not in begin or end. And I'm just going to switch from 10 to 25 so we can see more of these things all at once. For this particular process of trying to get something to put in date begin and maybe date end, I'm not going to be editing the date expression column because it's already in the format I wanted. If I was going to be messing with that, like trying to reformat some things, dealing with weird issues, or if I was working on another column like title or scope and contents, one of the first things I would do is go up to date expression, click on the little button, add column based on column, and call this date old. I just usually call it whatever the thing is plus old. Leave it at value, so it basically copies the contents of the cell. And then I just move column to end. And that is just, for me, a failsafe of having an extra copy of that data somewhere in case I mess it up somewhere along the way. There is the undo function, as Courtney showed you yesterday. You can go backwards. But this way, if you get multiple steps in and you've done tons of transformations, you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. You don't have to try and open up your original Excel file and look there. It's just already there at the end. You're just not touching it. So we want to get actual ASpace friendly, ASpace date begin friendly formatted dates out of this. And I'm going to show you how to do this the long way, and then I'm going to show you the fast way. So the first way, we're going to add a column again, because we don't actually want to mess with date expression. And we're going to call this date one, just that. And the first transformation we're going to do is value.toDate. So it's got the camel case, the D is capitalized. Parentheses, empty parentheses just means go for it. No, no instructions. And you'll notice in our preview, it shows us what's going on. We've got error, unable to convert. It can't parse these, but it's parsing all of these dates. What we're doing is just changing the date, the format type of this. So date, Boolean, number, text string, your 4 options. We're just saying, hey, instead of being a text string, we want this to be date format. I am leaving set to blank on error as opposed to store error because I then use filter by blank to just get the ones that worked or didn't work, as the case may be. I hit OK, and there we go. And anything that's not a text string is going to be green. So your numbers, your Booleans, your dates. And then I'm just going to say, do what I said. I use this so much and I wish it were a little higher up. We go to facet, customized facets. All the way at the bottom is facet by blank. So we've got the 4 that are empty. We'll come back to those. And then we've got the 25 that worked. This is starting to look like something you could use in ArchivesSpace, but we're not quite there yet. So the first thing I want to do is take it back to being a string. So we're going to go, instead of editing and adding a column, we're going to edit this column since it's the one we're working with, and we can do that now. Hit transform, and we're going to turn it back into a string, which is just toString, close parentheses. Closer, but we've got the timestamp part, right? We don't want that. So we're going to add one more function, edit cells, transform, and we're going to use split, which just tells it to break it into chunks. And we're going to split on the letter T. And now you can see in here, we've got in quotation marks our 2 options before and after the T. Because Grell is a coding language, it uses the kind of counting code does. So it starts at 0 rather than 1. And we tell it which one we want in square brackets. So the square brackets modify what's in the parentheses and the rest of the function. So we tell it square brackets 0 because we want the first thing. And again, the preview window is so helpful because we can just look at it and go, all right, this is what we're going to get. Cool. All right, now we've got this. And if we wanted to put it into this column, I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But first, I'm going to show you the fast way. So to be perfectly honest, this toDate, toString split on T is what I did for a really long time. And then I discovered, even after I discovered that you can stack functions and expressions, but then I learned about the simple date format syntax in the anything in OpenRefine that uses the date format, either going to a date format, something that's in the date format, or something you're taking from date into a different format, you can use these operators. And this is not all of them. This is a very small selection of them. But I pulled this up to show you why I'm going to be using lowercase y for year, capital M for month, and lowercase d for day, because lowercase m stands for minute in hour, because of course the date format includes minutes, and capital D for day is the number of the day in the year. So whatever day we are in the year out of the 365.24, I think it is. We don't want that. We want the day of the month. So if we come back here, I can stack my functions and I can tell them what to do. So I'm going to add a column based on this column, and we're going to call this date 2. And we're going to go to date like we did before. And we're going to get all of those dates. I'm going to tell it toString because, again, you can daisy chain functions. And when you add a function, it operates on the result of whatever the previous function was. So it's not changing the value to a string. It's kind of like order of operations in elementary school math where you learn how to do things. It's just sequencing. It's like a sentence. But in order to get it to split the T rather than splitting on the T, I'm going to add in some quotation marks, and I'm going to tell it we want it to be year, month, day. And it does it for me. So You can, now when I got to this point, right? Cool, I've got the dates I've wanted. I could export this and then manually copy and paste, but it is possible to use the transform function to call the values of another column. And this is honestly another reason why I tend to create new columns based on the existing columns when I'm working in OpenRefine, because it's much easier to call a very short column name than a long column name. So I'm just going to show you how that works here in date begin, since we've got what we want. I'm going to edit cells transform. And here we've got our cell date 2. So this is called cells in the column date 2 dot value. And that's how you call the values of another column. If that column has a space or a dash or other characters like that in the name, you have to use square brackets and quotation marks. So gives us that. That gives us that, which is great for all of these lovely normally written dates. What do we do about these? These were our outliers, right? These are the ones that didn't work. Well, 3 of the 4 of them are date ranges, and one of them is just a month by itself. So I'm going to show you how to deal with just the month by itself first, and then we're going to do the ranges. And I'm just going to do that by flagging the one I want to look at first and faceting by flag. And you'll notice that all of these facets are stacked, right? So this is like an and operator here. What we can do is use that same, the date operators that we used before to tell to date what it's looking at. So it can't parse this. But if I tell it that what we're looking at is a month written out, month names in words are 3 or 4 M's. In numbers is 2 M's. I don't know why. And now notice if I just put it to string, it's trying to give it the first of the month. It will automatically do that. And so we just need to tell it we want. And there we go. Great. What about these guys? Well, we can use split like we used earlier to get everything before or after the T to get these, because we know that it's basically the same as what we just did, which was to date to string. So I'm going to add a column called date end. I always like starting with the end date first. So we're going to call it so we're going to use split first. And we're going to split on the dash. I have occasionally run into problems with this when there are M dashes, N dashes, and dashes being used. So sometimes you need to clean that up first. Again, we start counting from 0. So if we want the second half, we will use 1. And then because functions stack, we can transform just that and then take it back again. And now we have the date we want. Before I hit OK, I am going to copy this because this is almost identical to what we are going to do to get date begin. And the only difference is whether we put 0 or 1 here. So rather than having to type all of this out again, I'm just going to hit copy. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to add column based on this column. On date begin. There. And again, with the preview, we can go April 1992. Yep. And so now we have much cleaner date data. I can move those over as needed. And just to show you, I've cleared out all my facets and filters. Because I cleared out the star column, everything here is empty. I tend to leave everything in when I export, and then I just look for the columns that are empty on that top row, and I know those are the ones I added, because if you leave them in, it will break the bulk import job. I have broken the import job many, many times. Um, so, um, so this was great for fairly straightforward dates. What do you get when you get something that looks a little bit more like this? Okay, just checking my time. Um, this is where we get into things that are a little funky. And I'm just going to show you again. I'm going to remember my rules and facet by star. And I'm just going to do a quick date one to date two, just that on its own, just to see what we get, to see what shows up blank. So most of these are turning out okay. Let's filter by blank to see. We've got 11 that don't work. Some of those just don't have anything at all. Some of them have some other information. And then, well, we've got a problem here. So if we go to the next page, it has taken all of my years that are only years and made them January 1st of those years. So that's unhelpful. So I'm going to go back to my undo redo, and I'm going to undo that because that's not going to work. We're going to set that aside for now. And we're going to use the text filter to just look for some other things. So circa, I will frequently go through and go look for all of the circas and add a column and call it fuzzy and set it to true, which will be my Boolean. Do we have any circas? Nope. Do we have any S's? Just in September. All right. And that lets me know these are dates that I'm going to have to figure out. However, my institution deals with fuzzy dates in the begin and end, I'm going to want to do that. I also know I have some bracket dates here, some square brackets. So I'm going to also make those fuzzy and deal with those later. And then you can see we've got some here that are date ranges again, and they use the word to. We can deal with those the same way we dealt with the dash. We would just split on the word to rather than on a dash. With those, we would run into problems because the date, I'll just show you if we do this. Let's transform, split on two, and we'll take the second one because again, I always like to date. It can't convert it because there is a leading white space. So if we were going to do this, we'd want to trim it and then do to date. So I'm not going to do that, but this is a good notification to remember to, one, if you're working with the date expression, to use the common transformation of trim leading and trailing white space. And two, if you're going to split, make sure that you trim. Sometimes the easiest way to do that is to add a column for those dates. So rather than doing it all in one, like I've been showing you, if we filter for two space, and I'm not doing just two because then we get Octobers. So two space, add column based on this column. Helps if I hit the right keys. Yeah. Great. Live demo, live mistake. I didn't give it a number, right? I just typed two and I didn't tell it which one to pick. And so it didn't know which one I wanted. So I have to remember to tell it what I want. There we go. And now I can trim. And what that would allow me to do by having the extra column is that if there were, you know, we can technically say this one is 1793 at the end, go through and find all of the possible ways that people might have separated and then split. Interesting. You can also just manually edit things. Not sure why I did that, to be honest. All right. So I'm actually running a little ahead of where I wanted to be, um, because the next thing I'm going to talk about is how to deal with things like we only want to get the dates that have 4 years in them, and even more messy dates, and that is regular expressions. And I'm going to dive into that after the break. So we can either take the break early, or if anybody has any questions about what we've done so far, I'm happy to answer them in the next 4 minutes.
Thanks, Megan. We don't have anything in the Q&A yet. Um, there is some interesting chat. It's not about this, but about like getting things out of Word documents into a spreadsheet format. So if people have
Oh,
any suggestions, yeah, I'm not saying you have to answer that, but I'm saying that there's some good conversation in the chat about that. If people want to catch up on that and give advice there, I mean, we all know that pain. But if oh, we do have see, I knew if I talked long enough, something might happen in the Q&A. So we do have a question. Corey says, where can you find a list of functions to reference in OpenRefine?
so functions to reference in OpenRefine. The easiest place is to go to OpenRefine and go to the documentation. And then there's a list of the functions under expressions, grell functions. And it gives all of them. So if I go down to date functions, that's actually where I learned about. I was like, huh, I bet there's more things I could do. Um, there's so many things you could do. I have not even gotten into it yet. This is like the full list of all of those. And you can apparently do things like tell me the difference between these times. Um, I will also say that there are some really good workshops and lessons out there. I've linked to those. And also, Stack Exchange has whole conversations about OpenRefine. If you're ever used code or anything code, Stack Exchange can be super helpful. So that's one.
Thanks. Yeah, so we got two more questions. I'm going to
Mhm.
read them both.
Okay.
And I think we can get them answered in 2 minutes and then we'll take our break. So Victoria asks, can you copy the dates into an existing column or do you always have to make a new one? And then Mary piggybacked on that to ask, um, can you repeat why creating that extra column is helpful?
Yeah. So you can put them into an existing column by calling them. So if I could, for example, take date one begin and just pull from date expression. Um, so which I would do by using that call with cells. And I'm always really careful with this because the number of like the spaces always trip me up, to be perfectly honest. So you can do that. Um, you'll get some blanks. You might also get some mistakes. And the reason why I like doing the work in an extra column, um, for this case, I'm leaving date expression as it is. I'm making something new. I want to be able to check my work before I put it in date begin because it may throw up bad answers, like when we did to date just straight up. And we saw that the year onlys were coming in as January 1st. So I like having it in a separate place. If you it's my messy spot, right? You don't have to work that way. You can do what works best for you. This is just what works best for me. So yeah. All right. So with that, I think we'll take our break. And we'll be back here. I don't remember how long I said I would.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. All right. We'll be back here at 1:45. All right. Thanks, folks.
All right, it's 45 minutes after the hour by my clock. Megan, are you back?
I am here.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So, like I said, we're going to talk about regular expressions or regex. And I noticed somebody in the chat has already mentioned regex, which is great because regex are both simple and complicated. Um, I first encountered them, oh man, like a decade ago, working on a project with born digital records that we needed to redact email addresses and phone numbers and that kind of thing. They are a way of giving the system a pattern to search for rather than a string. So my really quick example here is just, if you're looking at a document, you're trying to find dates, sometimes you just kind of search by 19 or 20, like, okay, I'll find the beginning. And that'll show you the beginning of years that start with 19, but it would also grab things like a zip code or a phone number or a street address or any instance of 19. Regular expressions lets you give a pattern. So this pattern in my second example is 19 in parentheses, which means match this thing. And then the square brackets are anything in this, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So it's basically telling it, find anything that's 19, digit 0 through 9, digit 0 through 9. So anything from 1900 to 1999. And that's giving me the years. It's also giving me this zip code because it matches the pattern, just happens to have another number on the end of it. Regular expressions are varied. There's a lot to know. I'm still learning, and I highly recommend the website regex 101 as a place to test strings and learn how things are working. Here is a really, really short list of tokens and regular expressions that I find useful when working with ArchivesSpace, specifically looking for anything to do with dates, especially in fields that are not date fields. So you use a slash to start and end regular expressions within most systems, including OpenRefine. But then you use a backslash to escape. So to either escape a character that otherwise would be like a control in regular expressions, or to sort of tell it you're putting in one of these tokens. So backslash D is any digit. If you follow that with curly brackets, you can put in a number or a number range. You can use square brackets to give a specific range. So 1 to 5 would just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It wouldn't include 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. And then the parentheses are basically giving it an array to look for. It's the or operator in your Boolean search, right? So it's 19 or 20. Text characters, we've got A to Z, uppercase, A to Z, lowercase, uppercase or lowercase. And again, you can use that parentheses with pipe or bar, whatever you want to call that character, to look for a series of options. And then some other useful things, particularly when dealing with OpenRefine, in my experience, are caret. So it's the start of the string or the line, $ into the string or line, \s non-breaking space, \b word boundary. Yes, and I'm really glad there are people here who know how regular expressions work because, as I said, I've mostly learned by doing. So if we go back to our second example group where we had all of these, and we go to text filter where we can search, you'll notice there's the case sensitive option. There's also the regular expression option. You do not have to escape on this. So I don't have to start it with that. It's implied by clicking that button. So I can just tell it that I want to search for any string of 4 digits. Well, that's great, but it gives me everything because all of these have dates. It does at least take out the rows that don't have any sort of date. So one option would be to caret and then starts and ends. So the only thing on this line is the date. The other way to do it, which will sometimes get you other results, is to tell it to look for anything with a letter and then invert. And this is handy because it would also, we don't have any here. It's going to show us our empty columns as well. But if we had something written with slashes, so it was a longer date or a funky date, but it it was, 7/4/76, that would show up as well. I'm going to go back to my first option. So I'm going to hit reset, caret. And it's going, I can't find anything because I hit reset and it undid my regular expressions. So on this case, we don't want these at all. These are not the dates we want. We can just use these dates as they are. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to date and I'm going to transform to null. Just basically, I'm deleting all of these. Get rid of everything. Now I'm going to come over to my date begin and just go ahead and plug in. Oops. You can tell I've done a lot of work with dates because I can type that column name very quickly. And now that's good to go. Yay. And if we wanted to look at everything that we didn't have, we could say facet by blank, true. And that's going to give us all of these, but not my year dates. Regular expressions can be helpful when you're dealing with trying to get from date expressions to ArchivesSpace Relay dates to be able to filter out certain kinds of formats. But I have found them to be really useful when you're looking for dates in other fields, specifically titles. So some of the stuff that came in for us, because it had just been basically line by line Word documents, everything ended up in the title on the initial import. But for this, I'm going to use, if you've ever worked in the ArchivesSpace sandbox, you will recognize the Krispy Kreme data. I hope that it's okay that I'm using this. And we're just going to do this. So if we're looking in the titles, you can see we've got some dates here, but we've also got some dates in here. And regular expressions makes it easier for us to find these. So I can do just D4, right? I can say, okay, find me any date. But that's going to get me other things. We've got some dates, but as we go through, all right, we've got some stuff with zeros and ones. Those are not dates. So what we'll do is we'll change up this expression. And because we know that this is all 20th and 21st century, we want just things that start with 19 or 20 and then follow with a D2. And now we've got some more options. So that's great. So now that I know I've got numbers, now to be fair, I might still be pulling out some zip codes. It's possible, but I don't want to tell it to have a boundary at the end because I'll lose anything that's like just 1960s or 1950s. I could find that in another way, but I'm going to leave it as it is for now. And this is part of why I create new columns is allows me to do this sort of iterative looking for things. So how do I get these out? I found them. What do I want to do with them? Well, I'm going to use a new function called find. And in find, we can also use our regular expressions. And actually in many of the functions in OpenRefine, we can use expressions. So I've just typed the same regular expression I have here, and I know all of these should have something. And then you'll notice that it's giving me sometimes more than one, right? So I'm going to put this title years. I want everything that's in this list. So I am going to, rather than picking the first one or the second one, I am going to say I want everything, and I'm going to do that by telling it to join with a semicolon. And now my new column will have a semicolon. And then if I want to see, oh, is there more than one? I just filter on, is there a semicolon? Yep. This is also really helpful. Like I said, we could look for the S's. So we could say, like earlier, I was talking about looking for any of my fuzzy dates. So I've searched my circas. And I'm going to add a column for fuzzy date. Call it true, anything that has circa. But I can also look for 19 pipe 20 D2S, and that's going to find me anything that's this 70s, 40s, and anyone that's not true, I can say, I would also like that to be true. Those are also fuzzy. And then I can start using this. And so what I would do if I were working through all of this is I would start going through and I would say, okay, here are everything I found that has a year in the title. And then how many of these are not fuzzy? All right. And then I might say, how many of these have a month in them? And this is where you get into, I use Markdown to take notes for these kinds of things because I find it, I'm familiar with Markdown from other work I've done. You could use Notepad, you could use notation, anything that lets you type in a way that's code friendly. So it's not going to try and make smart quotes. It's just going to make straight quotes. And this is also where having them comes in not only to write down formula as you're using it and functions as you use them, but to be able to refer to them back. And when you Google something and find somebody else has already written the regular expression that you want, you can just copy and paste it there. So this is one I have copied from the web. And this is very long, but basically it is an array of all of the months, both their long and short forms. So now we are finding anything that has a month in it. So if I wanted to, one way to do this would be to add a column based on this column and just say all months. Find, copy that same thing again, and there you can see it out. It's basically everything between the pipes is find one of these. The question mark is find the thing immediately before it 0 or once. And then, so it's Jan, because that's the normal shorthand form of January. So it's either Jan or January, Feb or February, etc. You'll notice September's in there twice, and that's because September is my bugbear when it comes to dates, as the toDate function doesn't necessarily always recognize sept, S-E-P-T, as a short form of September. So I have added it in to my own thing. So we've got September and September, October, November, December. So it's finding both the short and long forms of all of the dates. And right now it's not showing me anything because I haven't closed my expression. So find me any of those and then join with a semicolon. Right. Now I will point something out, which is if we take out these options and then I search filter for OG, it's finding me, it doesn't have a year, so it didn't show up, but August in or outside of that would still show us the Augusta Road because it shows up like that. You also run into things, I've had to double check dates because if you have someone named May or April, they're going to show up as a month name, even though that's just their name. So having a month and a day can be helpful. You can also there are regular expressions out there for the full day, right? So day, month, year. You could use regular expressions to look for dates that have that are written in short form. So 2-digit /2-digit /4-digit. And there are regular expressions out there to help you filter between ones that are written in the style of month, day, year versus day, month, year, because OpenRefine is lovely. It's not necessarily, you know, does not have critical thinking skills all the time, and so it might parse 2/4/25 as February 4th, 2025, but the person writing that was Italian, and so it's actually supposed to be April 2nd, 2025. So those are the kinds of things you need to watch out for. I also recently discovered that you need to be careful of 2-digit years now that we have gotten well into the 21st century. So the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, where I work, was founded in 1923, and I was dealing with some stuff that was just sort of written a print that, apostrophe 23 or apostrophe 27, and did a 2-date conversion, and it came up as 2023 and 2027, and I was like, oh no, we're a century off now. So knowing what you're looking at and making sure that you check it is very important before you go forward. So, so if I wanted to find just, as you get more comfortable with this, you can start getting kind of crazy with your regular expressions. Find and do things like this one, which is find anything which is a month and then ends there, a space or no space, and then 4 digits. And basically what I'm looking for there is any instance of month, space, 4-digit year. Need a column name. And we will facet by blank. And again, it's caught in September, but it doesn't see July to September, which is why I like using new columns so that you can iterate as you find things that have slipped through the cracks or are not quite formatted properly, or we're using an M dash and you are only using N dashes. One lovely feature about OpenRefine transformations is that in addition to our preview, we have our option for history, which lets us find anything that we've done before, like getting the expression of the value of date 1 expression, or finding these things. And we can star some of them. So if I know that I'm going to be using this one a lot, to date, month to date, and these two to split on dates, I can star them and then they'll show up in my starred. And you can see I have some other starred here that I use a lot. This is my beautiful replace all M dashes, N dashes, and double dashes and just make them dash so I can search more easily. I get rid of terminal spaces and periods using a chomp. Chomp gets whatever is the last thing. So that, and then this is also useful if you're dealing with something that has a lot of multi-values or joins. Split, so break it apart into an array based on, I use pipe a lot, but you could use like a semicolon. Uniques is get rid of all of the duplicates, only keep uniques, and then rejoin. So that lets you, if you've got something that has a lot of repeat years, it'll take it down to just 1 or 2 things. So this keeps you from having to rewrite a lot. So I could hit that and run OK, and it would run. I'm going to undo that. When we get to exporting, we want to make sure that we uncheck the filter by star, otherwise we lose this row. Again, that row is really important and you don't want to mess with it. Export to Excel, and then I can't show you this because I'm only on one thing, but the next step you would want to do is open that file, rename the tab of what you downloaded to updates, and open the original bulk update file that you downloaded and copy over the enums sheet. The bulk update spreadsheet job will not run in ArchivesSpace if your update sheet is not called updates, if you do not have the enums, and if any of the columns don't have a value that is parsable by the system in this first row. I have run bad update jobs so many times because I have forgotten one of these steps. I have a little more time than I anticipated, so I will also show you one of my useful tricks. So I'm going to facet by blank. And I think yep. And this one, I just need to go over to my markdown notes. Okay. Update spreadsheets, as well as import spreadsheets, will break if the date begin is older than the date end. And you can do things like that in OpenRefine like this. So I'm adding a column, calling it check date, and I want to make sure that this value is greater than or equal to, I think this works. Yep. Cells dot. So greater than or equal to. True. And now we just check for any that are false. And that's a really quick way to check and make sure that your date ranges have gotten the right way around. Okay. So going back to my slides. Again, I've covered most of these, but just things to watch out for. Checking your wrong century. Weird date formats. Oh, that's one I didn't mention. This one here. People putting dashes in interesting places can cause dates to not show up or to get converted to a date in a weird way. I've had more than a few that have this lovely range in the middle of the slash. June 2 through 4, 2023, you can convert this. It's a little trickier. Looking for fuzzy dates, making sure that your 1950 isn't 1950s. Looking for bad spellings, looking for OCRs. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's had to deal with this, where something's been OCR'd and it's mostly fine, except for the fact that all the ones become lowercase l's. So you don't have 1994, you have L994. And it's just generally a good idea to sort of spot check. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of rows, if you've got 65 rows, it's pretty easy. If you've got hundreds of rows, just kind of going page by page and looking for anything crazy, doing a couple of quick checks. So that is it from me. So are there questions?
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, we already do have some questions in the Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in and I will start reading what we've got there now. So this is a question about using OpenRefine with the ArchivesSpace bulk import spreadsheet.
Mhm.
Once you're done making edits in OpenRefine, do you simply delete the extra columns and re-import the spreadsheet as normal?
Yes. Yes. So usually what I'll do, I'll export to Excel and I'll save it. I'll change the name when I'm importing. So one comes in as bulk update, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then the other one comes in as and I'll just take out the whatever and just call it update. So it's not bulk update. Sometimes I will save the version with the extra columns and then save a new version depending on how much work I've done and how much I'm concerned about the spreadsheet breaking on the import. But yeah, usually I'll just download it. I'll get rid of the extra columns once I've downloaded it and I'll leave the columns in the project. do the necessary changes, and then run the spreadsheet. I tend to save those spreadsheets for a while, because the original one that I used to get into OpenRefine is the pre-cleanup data, and then I have the post-cleanup data, and that way I have a paper trail. Well, not a paper trail, but have a little record for myself that way. So
It's a paper trail.
yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So next question. Do starred expressions carry over to other OpenRefine projects?
They do. They do indeed. So if I go into here and I say I want to transform, or let's transform, and if I look at my history, you can see where it says from other projects versus this project. So I can see my history in all of my projects, and my starred come from whatever project I've started them from. So, and then help is here, and it gives you kind of a quick look. I find it much easier to read the manual than trying to parse this. But yeah, the starred are there. They're great. And I will also point out that some of the things you can do as functions exist in the common transformations. A lot of these, like if you look at the very top of the screen, you'll notice that what it's actually doing is a fancy replace regular expression. And it just was so common that they added it to the built-ins. So trim is just running trim, replace is a replace, to text, to date, to string. Those are all functions, to string, to number, to date, that they've added into the common transformation so that rather than having to type them out, you can just do them here. So. Other questions?
None in the Q&A, but we do have plenty of time. So
Yeah.
I'm going to speak very slowly and see if anything pops up. Yeah, so if anyone has any other questions, please do drop them into the Q&A. But while we wait, I'll go ahead and say thank you to Megan for this. Again, this was really helpful and really interesting. It's exciting to see what like tools like this, how they can be used in conjunction with ArchivesSpace. And I think that this is something that people will really benefit from. And I hope that this begins a conversation about using tools like that. And I liked seeing the conversation that happened in the chat as well. It's nice if we can like crowdsource these common problems together and figure out solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say, I'm happy to have more conversations with people about this, and I love to see how other people use OpenRefine. I've put some of these commonly used functions that I use in the resources for you guys, but it'd be great to have a space in Awesome Archives where we can all share these little snippets and just make everybody's workflow a little bit easier.
For sure.
I can take a minute and show you guys one of my other favorite tricks in bulk update if you want. It's not related to dates, but it is another thing I enjoy doing, which is if you've got a very large, this is not a lot, but let's say we're in, I don't think I did level on this. I did. I will facet by level and add a column based on this column and call it series. And wait, not that column though, title. And then as Courtney showed you yesterday, you can use fill down. And that way, when you start getting into individual records and you're like, what is this? What is this a part of? Where is this in my, or, or if you've got one that's just really funky and you're like, I can't deal with this in OpenRefine, I'm going to have to deal with this manually. You'll be able to find out exactly where it is by using that. So it's not essential, but it is a shorthand that I have used, especially if you have a lot of rows that have very similar or the same names. So there you go.
That is useful. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Everyone that left early missed out on that that trick. So
oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. All right. So we don't have any other questions in the Q&A. So
we'll go ahead and start wrapping up, but I'm again speaking slowly. There is time for questions, but thank you again, Megan. Thank you again, Courtney. Both of these sessions were really great. It was cool to see, like I said, and it's always impressive to watch people do live demos for this extended period of time. So I thank you both, and now you get to both take a really deep breath and you don't have to do this again. So that was really cool. Thank you everyone who stuck it out with us until the end. If you do have questions or comments or want to keep this conversation going, don't forget we do have the user group listserv. So if you have tips or tricks, be sure to post them there, and we can keep talking about this kind of stuff. This came out of, these two sessions came out of a very organic discussion that we had as part of the member match program. So when community comes together and talks, we can solve a lot of problems. So thanks again, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.